Thank
Hello and
you.
welcome
Mhm.
to NCGR Conversations. This is Rachel Lang. I'm the Outreach Director, and I'm so excited to be here with you today, JD. JD is
Thanks so
an
much.
astrological mage,
Yep.
and
Whatever the words.
yes, exactly. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you is the way that you have just stepped into leadership with leading the Astromagia, the Astromagical Conference.
Thank you.
So thank you for your
That's very
service and for
kind
your
of
work.
you.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt like a time that was really ripe. I felt like right before the Celestial Art was printed by Three Hands Press, of which Austin Coppock was one of the main editors for that. I had thought it was time, like coming time to create more context for raising the discourse, if you will, around astrological magic and in Western astrology. And I knew it would always start online
Hmm.
because it is slightly niche, you know, I get it. It is like a little bit niche, maybe less so these days than it was in the past. But as part of that, you know, it seemed right to bring together a more international group of people. So yes, I took it on myself to try to get that going and reached out to Nina Griffin and to Michael Ofek to see if they would also be interested in, you know, thinking about it with me. And they were very generous with their time and helped me to frame some of it a little bit more clearly and gave keynotes at the conference that happened last year. So yeah, it's been great. It's been lovely to see, and also I always say it's like all these different, uh, you know, we kind of are toiling or cultivating in similar gardens, if you
Hmm.
will, and it's lovely to bring together all these different practitioners, but also academics and artists that are working within similar fields of inquiry around, you know, what we might call astrological magic. I use the term astral magic because I think it's a bit broader. But I have no problem with astro magic, astrological magic.
So your background is more in the Hellenistic tradition. Is that correct?
So yeah, so when I started, you know, I've been involved with astrology as a student since I was probably 17 or 18. So mainly I was drawn to psychological astrology and evolutionary astrology. So did a lot of work with Stephen Forrest's material. Um, but then quickly got involved with some people that were looking at what shamanistic astrology might look like around integrating like observational practices with their work. And and yeah, so I think, you know, my base was around a lot of that. And then as a lot of people who were involved around the revival of traditional techniques and traditional astrology becoming like so prevalent, I did get more involved in that. And but I don't know. I think like I wouldn't say, I think now that most of my methodology comes from traditional techniques, but then we live in a time where we are really trying to understand the ways in which contemporary astrology is shaped, right? So I don't think, I mean, there are people that maybe hold really hard to a particular practice, but you can't not be inspired by the Hellenistic material when you read it. I think it's very difficult to not be just because of its elegance and its the beauty at which it is kind of showing that language of the sky. Um, and its place within our tradition, you know, that's there. But yeah, so I'd say practically I end up using a lot of Hellenistic, and then also owe a lot to Van Dyck's work around the Persian material that he's translated. So if am doing astrology, my methodology tends to go along those lines.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given your connection to astral magic and coming from that
Yeah.
tradition. There's so much there in terms of
Yes.
how we understand the different planets and yeah, can you talk a little bit about that, about
Yeah.
how you approach that?
Yeah, so whenever I made something, when I look back, like I think anyone that's been involved with magic for long enough, as like yourself, you eventually see how things you have done in the past are very magical, right? Like you might
Absolutely.
not have labeled them that, but then you're
Uh-huh.
like, wait, I've been doing this for a bit.
Uh-huh. Yes,
And
yes.
what I would say about that is I realized that, when I was in my 20s, I was sewing these patches for friends that would incorporate astrological symbolism around timing that related to their ascendant sun and moon. So I was like making these patches and putting beads and stuff, like anyway, I was just fooling around with it. And, you know, so in the beginning, and it was really oh gosh, you might have to help me remember. Making the Gods Work for You,
Oh, Carolyn
Caroline
Casey.
Casey.
Yeah, yeah, Caroline Casey.
Okay, so again, this is like pre a lot of the stuff that we come to think of as
Yeah.
astrological magic. But
Mhm.
she was talking about even then about how we can create practices that link us to the gods, and ways of communicating with her, and I with them. And I would say that within that, I already saw and began like a journey, not knowing very much around this. And then now, it's very common now whenever you speak to someone who has a little bit more experience within astrological magic, typically they'll say, planetary prayers, days of the week, like get
Yes.
going. And
Yes.
it's basically the same advice that Caroline Casey was giving, just like in a more traditional format, of some
Right.
kind.
Right.
Um, so I think that, and this was, and I'm not alone in this. I think that that's been part of the thing, is that trying to understand the many voices that have carried this along for longer, like obviously Christopher Warnock,
Mhm.
and the work that he has done is been really influential.
Mhm.
Um, and then like Michael Ofek and Austin Coppock have really done so much with it. But also, Nina Griffin has
Yes.
really helped make astrological magic a lot more present within
Mhm.
the community too. So I think that that here, they are going about it in their own ways. But one of the things I think is similar amongst all of those is that this idea that, just like for me, when I went from looking at just a map of the sky as we might render it in our astrology, Western astrology, um, it's very different when we start to think, okay, we go out and we actually encounter the sky.
Right. Right.
um, and also the way in which the planets become a part of that,
Mm.
and the stars also
Mhm.
start to be much more, their presence is hard to ignore in that context,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
um,
Yeah, and
and
you're
then
right.
all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Keep going.
No, I was
Yeah.
just going to say that with that, with within that context, you are taking something that is and it's not a thing to be judgmental about, but it is a representation of the heavens, and now we're encountering the heavens. And so I think the first conference was kind of looking at this more deeply as a group, which was the idea that with that, just as with observational astrology or astronomy, we move away from a map or like a backlit screen
Uh-huh.
towards an embodied experience of the heavens and earth. Astrological magic allows us the opportunity to move from concept to encounter.
Mm.
So we are having, when we call and make space within our life for, say, a planetary god, form, if you will, then, you know, we learn maybe how that creates a context to encounter something a bit more directly than
Mm.
we do when we rely on our abstractions within astrology. We kind of default to abstract things a lot of times and give words to it. But when we call these forms and engage with them and invite them into our life, yes, something very different happens. So we're able to create an encounter.
Yeah.
I think that's really fundamental to a lot of it.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean, I think that's what magic is. I mean, anytime you cast a
Mhm.
circle, anytime you work with symbols of any kind, talismans, even just
Yes.
calling in the four directions, what you're doing is you're bringing the natural cycles, you're bringing the elements, you're basically,
Hmm.
your whole body is essentially a magic wand connecting the supernatural and the physical. Um,
Definitely.
and just to
I
quote
like that.
to quote Caroline Casey again, she says magic is the willingness to cooperate with everything. And and so I mean that's been my experience of astrological magic too, is like you're saying, having an embodied experience of planetary energies that you're bringing into
Yes.
your space in specific ways. Mm,
Yes. And I think that it changes things, for you. I think it's already there. I think again you can play with all kinds of things that are present within what we might class as like psychological astrology. Like for example, when people combine things, and I'm not well versed in this, so I am speaking a little bit outside of what I understand. But like when we do stuff along the lines of like family constellation therapy and astrology, you are seeing this magical way in which we can place things or call forth, representation of the chart,
yeah.
or a
Yeah.
family member into a session. And it's odd how things start to happen there, where it's like someone who does not know your mom or your sister, is immediately able to give presence to something that is relevant to you.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's always there. I think it's just, and the other piece though around it is that we know, and this is something I go on and on about, and we'll give a presentation for ESAR this month around some of this. But the as inheritors of what remains of the enchanted, we're calling Western culture a thing, which we have to kind of imagine some brackets around that. We're sort of general whenever we're using these terms, but like, we are as astrologers, we are the inheritors of the remainder of what is the enchanted aspect of our world.
Mm. Mm.
And, we're
Oh,
not the only, oh, sorry about
oh,
that.
no, no. I just needed to take a pause for that. Just one moment. I need to
Yes,
digest that. That's beautiful.
please.
That we
Thank
are the
you.
inheritors and therefore the torch
Yes,
carriers of the enchanted world. I love that, JD. That's really
yes, we
beautiful.
are.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you. Similarly, though, we are also, the phrase I use a lot as well is we are children of this particular problem, which is arising out of the history of Western astrology. I think you can find the the roots of what lead us to imagine a disenchanted world, as well.
Mhm.
And so when I say that we're children of this problem, I think that, and we're not alone in this. There are other types of practitioners that toil within the enchanted world, that they are too also inheritors of it. But I think that in this moment where we do have a little bit more value to society at large, it's a rare moment. Some people talk about how long it can last or not last. um, I do think we're in a unique position to uh, bring forward more of an enchanted worldview. And the
Mhm.
reason that that is so important now is we know we are facing many challenges as groups, as a world. And I think that the more, as you said, say the quote from Caroline Casey again that you mentioned, it was perfect.
Magic is the willingness to cooperate with everything.
Look at that. So already there, from my mind, I can hear so much animism and so
Mhm,
much enchantment within that,
mhm,
because it's giving truth to that we are all relative to one another. Do you know what
right,
I mean? We're all relatives to one another.
and to the
Like
earth.
Vine Deloria said, we all, there's that coming together that we need. And I think it's natural for us as astrologers to be able to see the ways in which we are interconnected. Um, so similarly in that, I think that for those that want to push on that more or tangle with that a bit more readily, there is the lineage and the ongoing um, the ongoing development of what we might call astral magic, where we are working within the contents of the relationship between heaven and earth,
Mhm,
and a lot of that this year, the conference is focused on the framing was, and not every talk is focused on this, but a lot of them really are, which is focused on um, astral astral lore, astral magic. So
mhm,
we know especially as we've recovered things, we often talk about doctrines, right? So doctrines are like unique kinds of lore. But for example, Demetra George is using it as a place she shared some of their work with the Egyptian decans in other places, like
mhm,
Astrology University. But
yes,
what we were able to give her this time was just the opportunity to look at the way in which story is this sort of way of engaging between heaven and earth.
mm,
The sky and the land carry story.
mhm,
And I think that this is a fundamental thing. We think of the sky as uh, not of the place that we are, but
right,
astrologers immediately know very important things change, right? As
yes.
it relates to where you are.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean, one of the core underlying principles of astrology is as above, so below, that the microcosm
yes.
is the macrocosm. And so
Mhm.
we, yeah, I think you're right. I think we as astrologers have that visceral understanding because we know at any point what's happening up in the sky, and
Definitely.
the way that it's playing out in our lives.
It's very true. And there was someone, I am also the chairperson of the Scottish Astrological Association.
Yeah.
And we had, I might be able to get their name, we had a lovely astrologer present this year um, that was talking about the Liz Hathaway. She was talking about Pluto and Aquarius, and what she brought forward were some insights around another astrologer who had looked at the discovery of, and just an example, looked at the discovery and the innovation of the atomic bomb
Mhm.
and the timing and the lines of certain important Pluto transits that ran through the landscape. So again, I know that that's using very modern technique, talking about land and sky, but that is relevant. How sky is showing itself within the land is a very common and natural thing that many cultures in the past and many cultures contemporarily have. It's very easy for them to see this relationship between lore, story, and the sky earth relationship. And I
Mhm.
think that for us, this is a place where we can start to be inspired by our own practices that help us to do this, but also those that we can be inspired by other groups of people who have a lot more wisdom in this than we do. And I don't know if the conference will get there around it, this year, but the point was that story is fundamental
Mhm.
to the way that we create understanding, and telling of those stories, and the living quality of story, is fundamental to a lot of this. So yeah, this was the focus for this year's conference, and there's some really amazing keynotes that are focused on this, some featured speakers that are focused on this, and also many of the contributors' work is bringing this forward, you know? So
Mhm.
I'm very happy with that.
That's so great. When just for anyone listening, when is the conference?
Yes, so it's October 8th through 10th.
Mhm.
And we decided because you have to anchor it in some time zone. So even though I live in Scotland, we put it in the Eastern time zone,
Mhm.
just because it kind of matched more of the community as it was shaped right now. So yes, so it's 3 full days really, and there's, you know, probably more than any one person can really attend to at the time, you know, unless you're really dedicated. But the nice thing is that all of it is available if you're a participant. All of it's available in a video library ongoing after the conference itself.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
but yeah, at Astromagia or Astro and then magia.org.
Great, great.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Well, I am so
yeah,
thrilled to be speaking at this conference,
yeah.
and
I'm thrilled
I
too.
can't wait. And you know, I just love all of the group of astrologers that you've brought together. I think it's going to be
Thank you.
a really powerful. I think it's going to be magical, number one, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to be a really meaningful experience for everyone who comes. Yeah.
Good. That's what we hope for. Last year, you know, and I think, and not that this will stay the case for a long time, but is the principal conference focused on astrological magic right
Yeah.
now? So
Yes.
that, you know, for those that are interested in it, that are, you know, either beginners or people that have some experience, um, there's a lot there to draw from. And the wonderful thing too is that it's bringing together slowly. It takes time to get these things to happen, but you know, we were really happy that Dan Trell, who is one of the recent translators of the Latin Picatrix,
Mhm.
he is an academic, but then also, you know, blurs lines like a lot of us do in some ways. But Dan is going to give a talk for us, and that's wonderful to see. You know, to see more people feeling comfortable to kind of step into that. And then
Mhm.
there'll also be some artists and performers who work within, you know, tangling with astral magic or astral astrology in a creative way. And I think it's always important to give them some
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's actually one of the primary ways that I do talisman art. So that's one of the primary ways that I work with
Amazing.
astral magic. Yeah. 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 So
Yes. And I mean, even to that, the like Cadmus will give a talk around looking at Orpheus and art as a model for understanding what we're doing when we do magic, you know.
mm,
So I
mm,
think you would have a lot to share around that, and that's the good thing too is we will have a panel this year focused again on creative expression and astral magic.
how
So you know,
exciting.
and that's the thing is most people, if they're looking for places to start, it's kind of similar to, I think the basic advice is like similar Caroline Casey, or it doesn't matter, they all say just start doing something that
Yes.
links time, purpose, and you know, some action of some kind, and just see what starts to happen. You know, there's a lot of fear around certain things related to magic. Often people are a little nervous, and you know, particularly working with things like the sun and the moon, and working with planets like Jupiter and Venus. You know, these are really natural, easy ways to start for people to just find a way to link that time, intention, and action, and just go for it and see where it takes you, you know. But it was lovely to chat with you
It
about
was so
this.
great to talk to you too, JD. And thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And I really look forward to seeing you at the
Okay.
conference.